Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the afternoon session of the Extraordinary Technology Conference 2016. Today, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to a really good personal friend of mine. Al Throckmorton actually lives in my backyard, or you could say I live in his. And he has a vast array of experiences to draw from. He is always there for anybody who has questions, who is diligently working towards a goal. His knowledge base is vast. He started out, he's been involved in these technologies for as long as I can remember. He's known nearly every single person that you could read about. He was he was a troop transport pilot during the Korean War. He's a meticulous researcher, and it is also his birthday. So, Al Throckmorton, could you come up here for a moment, please? Could you come on up? Welcome, Al Throckmorton, and let's wish him happy birthday. Al has got some fantastic technology to present today, something that can be a real game changer and make the world a better place all at the same time.
Without any further ado, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Al. Happy birthday to you. Ow! Hey, is this 23 or 24, Al?
He's 24 with a lot of experience.
I'm 85.
Wow.
And so it's a real blessing to be here today because you're my birthday present. And I'll tell you why. He said, I know that each one of you is an individual, and the people who attend this kind of conference are very strong individuals and have been through what some might call hell to arrive here and different experiences. And you're thinking out of the box, and when you open your mouth, sometimes you're called crazy. And sticking to what you believe takes a lot of fortitude. The law of originality, Dr. Pelio, Italian kinesiology specialist who works with NASA and works with every astronaut so that they might learn something about their bodies and themselves, which is very important when you're in space, especially if you're in difficulty. And he wrote a book called The Law of Originality. And he said, I could have saved you taxpayers $1 trillion because you're never going to find another Earth. I can just visualize for a minute that this is a telescope, and I'm looking through there. And if I go around to the darkest part in the sky, up north, towards the North Star, and I look up there, and you can't see anything, and I take a straw, that's the size that the Hubble telescope was looking. Turns out a couple of guys talked to the people who control the Hubble telescope to focus on an area of the heavens where there is no stars visible, or even with pair of binoculars, even with a telescope, even with the Hubble. They found a spot where there is nothing. And they talked to people in the Hubble of concentrating on that specific spot for 11 days in a few hours. Needless to say, there was some discussion about wasting that valuable time. At the end of the time, they shut it off and took the data and put it on photographic film. And they're standing there on this, looking at this developed film, and they looked at each other and said, "Oh my God, we know nothing." Because in that little tiny section were more galaxies than you could count. What does that mean when they said, "Oh my God, I mean nothing"? Because you see, the time it took for those pixels to travel, there's not enough time, even in our misunderstanding of eternity and time and space, for them to have been built. I'm here because of the Lord's mercy and grace. And I'm going to start out by giving a little background of how I got here. And then going to the pump, a little history in the pump for those of you who have not seen it or heard anything about it before, quickly. And then I'm going to go through what we've done since that time, made the presentation in 2014, and then talk about what we're going to do and what we are doing. And I'm very grateful to follow Maury King in talking about splitting water. We've learned so much about water. But first of all, let me just show you this little, can I display this, sir? These gentlemen who were looking at the film suddenly realized that there had to be a creator. And the creator told one of his prophets, Jeremiah, he says, "I want you," Jeremiah said, "Hey, I'm not qualified to speak for you. Who am I?" And he said, the Lord said to him, "I knew you in your mother's womb. Now I want you to tell everybody that I have a plan for you, not to harm you, but to prosper you, and that you would have an eternal hope and without fear." The question is, do you know his plan for you? Because in the law of originality, there are no two human beings alike, and we know that from there are no two fingerprints alike. We're all completely different. Similar, but different. I keep bees. I have 30,000 bees in a hive, and I have 3 beehives. Paoli indicated, because he tested bees, he became an expert. There are no two bee wings alike. No part in the bee wing alike. Similar, but you can identify each bee wing. Each bee has its own personal character. And, well, the same. Now, Paoli took his kids and traveled all over the world. And John, you're directing some of these kids and helping some of these young people, not kids, young people, young personalities. And so he went all over the world, took pictures of, had his kids take pictures of zebras, scuba diving, pictures of fish, all the same kind of fish. No two zebras alike. You won't find it. Every leaf on these trees out here, same kind of tree, a walnut tree or an oak tree, every leaf is different. Everything. So the law of originality says there's only one of you in the whole cosmos, the whole creation. Looking back billions of years, they won't find a duplicate of you and you and you and you. And you're very important in the Creator's sight. And He made you. And He had a plan for you, has a plan for you. The question is, do you know what that plan is? I made a mistake earlier in my life when I was younger, during the Korean times. Praise God, I got to Korea right after the armistice was signed. So I landed on beaches, on islands, and grass strips all over the place to resupply remote radar sites and that kind of a thing. And it was very fortunate that I got there after the shooting started. So there was still some shooting going on, but it was minor. If you consider only 12 people being killed, minor. Like, don't get me involved in the politics. So anyway, what I did is earlier in my life, after I got back, I suddenly I was having a ball. You see, I wasn't being touched by any of this misery. And it suddenly occurred to me I had no idea where I was going or what I was doing, and I had no plan for my life. And so I said, Lord, forgive me for being presumptuous, but I don't know where I'm going, don't know what I'm doing, and here's my life. What should I do with it? It was like it was sitting in the car next to me. And I want to encourage you all to do the same thing. It's very simple. You want to know the plan? You got to ask the guy who's created the plan. And guess what? You try that. And before I get out of here, you let me know what the result is. Now, many times I haven't followed the plan. And guess what? That's where I run off the road. Okay, now the pump. I worked for a while at Hewlett-Packard as a microcircuit process engineer. And I had technicians come up to me and say, Al, I can run my pickup on water. And they just read about this dissociation of water and making hydrogen out of water. And so I can run my pickup. Well, I having studied it a little bit, said, well, that's a problem, Bill. I said, you're going to have an engine bigger than the engine in your pickup to generate enough power to disassociate the water. Because Faraday said it's only 75% efficient. Well, that was my attitude. And I gave you that background because you'll see some pictures in a minute. And so 1995, well, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I wound up being in the solar energy business, and I was going to help save the world, and using green energy, and I was in Minnesota. The sun doesn't shine much in Minnesota, and you got to be creative using the sun. And but I was asked by the World Bank to develop a pump to pump 32 gallons a minute from 30 feet. And I was going to use solar equipment, evacuated solar tubes, evacuated tube collectors, because when you put the collecting plate that's getting warm in a vacuum, you don't lose anything. Nothing is radiated back out again. So you capture all the heat. Even in cloudy weather, you capture the infrared, and we just had a discussion on the infrared. That makes it through the clouds, and we didn't need direct sunshine. And so I've got a way of doing this, and I'm going to use a Tesla turbine to convert low-pressure steam and have it turn and hook to an alternator to generate the power to run a pump in the well. Now, you see, in the sub-Sahara, maybe it only rains once every 3 years, and there's plenty of, the ground is fertile if you can get some water on it. And 32 gallons a minute is enough to irrigate 5 acres of land. And so what the World Bank was going to do was arrange 5 acres for these families. And not only one crop, but you could have 3 crops a year, and then we could be independent. We could support our families and sell the food and develop the economy as it developed early in the United States. It was the farm economy here that you remember we used to be. And farm tractors, farm equipment, and et cetera, that's where the industry started. So I'm standing on the roof of the Solar Energy Research Institute in Florida, which is located at Cape Canaveral. And I'm standing there, and we're running this thing. And we had tested it in a hospital that had a big steam boiler. We had plenty of steam, and we ran the turbine, and yes, we were able to run the pump all right. So I'm standing there on the roof where we got the collectors and the whole setup, and we're going to do this little demo. And I had a $5,000 grant to do that, to buy the equipment, build it, and test it. And we couldn't get the thing to work because there was one restriction. One of the restrictions, besides 32 gallons of water a minute from a well 32 feet deep, was that it had to cost less than $2,400. Because what they want to do was lend the money to the family for the pump, and then would pay back. They weren't going to give it to him free, but they knew that he could generate enough from the farm crops that he was growing to pay for the pump, feed his family, and after 2 or 3 years, he could pay off the pump, and then he would be free and clear and starting to make some real money. Well, I could do it, but my operation would cost about $10,000 because I needed more solar collectors, and they were the expensive part of the deal. And I'm standing there on the roof, and how many have seen or read the book, The Red October, about the Russian submarine? Clancy's book? Yeah, very good, thank you. So I'm standing on the roof, and the fellow that arranged the grant for me said, hey, I've got some Russian friends up there in Princeton, New Jersey. Let me call them and see if the Moscow Institute of Technology's got any technology. And what started that was when the Soviet Union fell, the communists fell, and Russia went through, every city was a huge garage sale. There just wasn't any money, terrible economy. Talk about an depression. Our depression in the United States was compressed down in 1 year there in former Soviet Union. But you see, the Russians had a building on Wall Street, a corner of Wall Street and May, on Wall Street. If you've ever been in Manhattan and you go down Wall Street, one of the side streets off of Wall Street is May Street. And right on the corner of Wall Street and May is a building that's been owned by the Russians since the 1700s. What were they doing there? During the 1800s and late 1700s, they were a printing company. And they printed all the stock bonds, certificates for the financial sector of Wall Street. And they printed U.S. Treasury notes for the country early. And so they've been involved in the history of the financial history of the United States. Well, needless to say, the heating system hadn't been updated since about 1900, I think it was 1870 or so. And what on earth has this got to do with the pump? Well, we'll see. He said, so they didn't have any money, and they were going to lose that building, which they'd owned for a couple hundred years, because they couldn't pay the utility bill. You see? All right. So they used a new heating technology. The new heating technology came off the submarine, the Red October. And you may remember in the movie what was significant about that submarine and why the United States was so concerned about it. The propulsion system and the nuclear reactor on that was the quietest thing. And they had some heat exchangers in that, and using the heat off the reactor to provide heat and whatever they needed in the submarine. And they used that technology in the building on Wall Street and May. And they lowered that the heating bill on that to 10 cents on the dollar from what they were paying before. And I was very interested in that because I had a meatpacking plant in Colorado. So I was interested in using that technology, and we were operating out of Minnesota. And if you're in a little town in northern Minnesota, I don't know that any of you have been up there, but I know some of you had because I've talked to you. And believe me, you're pretty creative about how to provide heat for yourself. And so consequently, we were going to try to incorporate this technology. So I'm standing there on the roof, and I'm on a radio phone. No cell phones, you know. This is a fantastic invention. Fantastic thing that serves us. And so I got a big radio phone up there, and I'm talking through Princeton, New Jersey, and they're contacting the people in Moscow Institute of Technology to see if maybe we can make this operation a little more efficient that I've got there on the roof. And so they told me on the phone, we'll try to get a hold of Dr. Fazinko. Well, you may not remember, but the Red October was the first of the Oscar-class submarines using this new technology, quiet technology. Well, I knew who it was. It was Admiral Fazinko, the designer of the Red October. And so they introduced me to him, and he's waiting for my question, you see. And we're speaking through Russians, interpreters in Princeton who have no technical background. But I knew that he knew English. He was from Ukraine. And so the first question out of my mouth was Clancy correct? Because I knew they had read the book and seen the movie in the Kremlin. And they were very concerned how Clancy got all the information on the details of that submarine, which was top secret. You see? And his answer back to me was typical Russian response. He said, Al, he was not correct in every detail. That's a direct quote. And the Russians are very truthful. They just don't tell you the whole story.
No? Nah.
Nah. So at the end, we held a further conversation, and he told me that the detail that was not correct was in the movie they showed the control room of the submarine and the panels. He said they didn't have that quite right. He didn't deny at all that submarine wound up in the river in Bush, Maine country. I'm not saying it's a true story. You understand? So it was great fun. So he's trying to honor the interpreters there, and I'm working, they're talking to me, and I'm just standing there on the roof and trying to explain the pump that I had put together and what I needed. And I told him, theoretically, it only took a third of a horsepower to pump 30 gallons a minute from 30 feet. And theoretically, I could generate enough low-pressure steam through the Tesla turbine to do that. And he got very frustrated with the interpreters because they couldn't interpret what I was asking and couldn't tell me his response. And finally, at the end of the conversation, near the end of the conversation, he just said, "Al, you don't have enough damn steam." Gave up the project and I didn't get any money. So anyway, except I was paid for the grant. But that got me into the pump water business, and that's how I wound up being asked to build a pump for Uganda and for the grandmothers there that you see on the picture. And there's my first, here we go. Right over there, you see there's a man in white, that's Doug McCain, who went over there to see about doing this project and what was going to be required. And David Mporpora of Christ Aid in Uganda had a slight, had spent time in America, fantastic musician, and he asked me about building a pump. Let's see if I can get, the next one, excuse me. If I can see, what's this one over here? How do I work this thing? Yeah, that's it, the problem. Thank you, if you do that for me in the next one. Here was the problem that was presented to me. There was a small, isolated village of 2,500 people without potable water, electric power, no funds. They had no money. It's made up of grandmothers and their grandchildren. Something about the grandmothers. Under Idi Amin, their children had been carved up, slaughtered, and they were raising their grandchildren. In one case, one of the grandmothers was 100 years old, and she had had 16 kids, and I think it was 4 of them that were actually cut up in front of her eyes while the thugs held them. And so they're raising their own grandchildren. Now, going down the page there, if I could. The situation was that Christ Aid was raising money to help the 150, actually there were 183 grandmothers, we found out later. They had to get potable water. They had no water, no facilities in these little huts that we're living in. And they went over a 500-foot ridge, mountain stream, typical of what you find in Colorado. The water is down there, you know, beside the road. And so we knew they needed 10 gallons a day, where 100 is the U.S. standard. That's 25,000 gallons a day, no power, limited funds. Next, I think the next going down, yeah. Now, what we had was plenty of labor, adequate water from the stream, and plastic pipe is cheap all over the world. So we didn't worry about running pipe to where it could be used and how to pump the water. That's how this Lord's Pump project got started. And the reason it's called the Lord's Pump is because there's only water and plastic pipe. How do you pump water? With that. Well, our typical solution would be you just buy a generator, generate the electricity and all that kind of routine, but they had to carry the water, carry the gasoline in drums that far. And over there, it was, at that time, you remember we were paying them almost $5 a gallon? There it was $10 a liter. And they didn't have any money at all. So, what happened? Okay. So I went to bed, and the reason I gave the background about Carradines and the impossibility of gaining anything by disassociating water. I said, Lord, what on earth am I going to do with this? This is an impossible situation. Nothing is impossible with the Creator. So I got the dream, and simply it was a voice in my ear, kind of a thing in a dream. It said, Al, use water as the fuel. Well, as you know, coming from an engineering background, how am I going to use water for fuel? And so I had attended this conference a number of times, and I knew that, yeah, you could disassociate water. Well, an article came across my path about disassociating water. And it was a Japanese paper. Anyway, let's go to the schematic that was given to me. So at night, I got a sort of a picture of how this thing would look. And I think you can see it there. You see, water comes in the bottom here, fills this thing up, and this gas comes in the top, and when the water fills up there, and there's a spark plug there, I ignite the gas, and there'd be a boom, and since it's a check valve, the water couldn't go back, the water had to go the other direction. I wasn't told about how big it was, but 4-inch pipe is easily available, so we did it in 4-inch pipe, and that's what I had. Well, a paper appeared later, well, not later, right at the same time. Mizumo's paper. Russian physicist by the name of Kirov had contacted Mizuno, a Japanese physicist, Mizuno. Mizuno, there's a later picture of the pump as we made progress. And we're making progress. Mizuno, apparently they'd met at a conference and had been talked into running this test. Now, who is Mizuno? Mizuno was a physicist, nuclear physicist, PhD at Hokkaido University, but he ran the lab there, and that lab was the lab that the Nuclear Regulatory Agency of Japan used. It was the best laboratory in the world. Can you find it there? That's all right. I'll get to it here in a minute. And so what he did, it seems that it's a high school experiment to put 2 electrodes in a glass of water, and you see and hook it up to a battery and see the bubbles appear at the electrodes. If any of you took high school chemistry, you probably did that experiment in the lab.
Now, which one did you want up?
It's a Mizuno file. I think it's number 4 or something on there.
Okay, sir. Looking. Number 4, drawing revision A. Okay, hold on. That's not it. Okay, stand by.
Mizuno was the first guy in history that actually measured the amount of gas you get. See? Because it's well known in chemistry, you know, hydrogen and oxygen on the periodic table, and when you combine them, you have H2O, and you know how many molecules of hydrogen you have and how much oxygen you have in a mole of water. Yeah, there we go. And need to go on down to the first chart on it. There it is, right there. And I've underlined it. All right, stop right there. Experimental results. Thank you. Perfect timing. So what happened is that, you see there, they used 2 different kinds of electrolytes, and here's the energy expense that you see, and they're measuring the actual gas output, value of the gas, the hydrogen, and over here is the water consumption. So they're actually measuring the amount of water that they disassociated and the amount of gas they got. Now, if you see down here, you can't quite read that, but I'll read it to you. It's known that from a liter of water, it's possible to produce 1,220 liters of hydrogen and 622 liters of oxygen, of the gas that's generated by that. However, they called it the plasma electrolytic process, and as you may remember from last year, it was defined as a plasma when you do the electrolysis. It appears in there, and you remember what Maury King was saying, is the plasma electrolytic process, the amount of gas is much greater that's in the water. I won't go into any more detail, but Mizuno changes the notation from liters to cubic meters. And it was generally missed in the people looking at the literature, because everybody knew when you electrolysis, you get hydrogen and oxygen. But you see, if you do, on the back of my hand, I'm not a degreed engineer. So it's got to be simple, and it's got to teach me. Otherwise, I'm ignorant, you see. And so it turns out on the back of your hand, if you do the calculations, it's 13 times more hydrogen and oxygen than is in the water. They spend the next 3 pages, and the full article's on the website, trying to explain at the molecular level what on earth is going on. And at the end, they just simply say, we don't have the slightest idea. That's not what they said, because it's a peer-reviewed paper. What they said is, this needs further investigation. And we have spent how many lectures here trying to explain? And Maury King came, oh my goodness sake, I gotta go. All right, so what happened, that changed everything. It's a paradigm shift, and the result here is the pump. And water comes in here, fills up here, there's a sensor, here's the spark plug, Murakami's plasma ignition system, because when we first built it, we used an ordinary automobile ignition system, and you're making water. You realize when you explode or combine the hydrogen and oxygen, the byproduct is water. And the water doesn't go well with spark plugs. And it condenses on the spark plug, and the next thing, the plug was fouled. And quickly show me the video of at actually working. I had a number of people tell me, physicists tell me, this is impossible. I was very discouraged. This is the electrolyzer right down here in the base. I'll get to it in a minute, a little different one. Go ahead. I have 55 gallons of water in the drum above, simulating the stream. Down here, water going into the bottom here. And let's see if it works. There's a 20-foot pipe attached to the end of the pump.
3, 4.
Okay, that's enough.
4.
Thank you. So that proved that we could blow water. The pressure, a 500-foot head is 200 psi. So we needed about 260 psi. I wasn't told that. That's why the little gauge there that tells me how much pressure. It's 267 psi. Blow that water out of there. How much water? It's about 2/3 of a gallon. We're firing it manually here, there, because the spark plug would foul all the time. If I put it on automatic, I could do it fired every 2 seconds. That's 30 times a minute with 3/4 of a gallon, and that's 24,000 gallons a day if you run on it.
We can flood this room.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but the trouble is, it only run a little bit before it fouled, and what am I going to do with that? And then Aaron Murakami up in Spokane came up with this plasma ignition system, which you heard Maury King talk about, and it flashes a plasma so loud that when this thing is, I took this plug out and demonstrated, it's loud. And a bang, and you spray some water on the spark plug, boom! So, guess what? It worked fine. I've run it 40 hours, 50 hours. We'll get on to the progress now. This valve, stainless valve, high pressure valve, to allow the gas that's made in a separate electrolyzer, like that one right down there, runs off 12 volts, will bring the gas up and it goes into the top here. And I have to have a high pressure stainless steel valve that unfortunately is expensive. The plastic pipe and the check valves are cheap. The whole thing can put together for $100. And here's the control box. It's simple with some relays. So that gets us to still need power. We're running it off 12 volts on an electric battery, and we could do it with solar. However, just recently, new technology popped up. I'm frustrated because I've been working on this since 2008, and I'm the biggest critic. You know, I didn't believe this thing would work until we blew water out of there, let alone the physicists I was talking to. The Melinda and Gates Foundation, they have a water project. Their chief physicist told me, sitting around my dining room table, he says, "You're crazy, Al." But fortunately, I had a bride. She's gone now. But Mary Lee said, "There's no way, Al, you're going to quit." She'd kick my butt, you know. So I kept working on this project. Okay, this device right here is a standard induction cooktop. Most of you, especially the women, know about induction cooktops. You can buy them on full stoves, but you can also buy individual ones. This is Tesla's Pancake Coil 1904 patent, which he showed to the utility companies at the time. He had lost the battle. They were going to send power here by wire, and they were charging for the electricity, and he said, "I can show you a way to get 5 times the output from your generator." Okay, yeah, they'd be interested in that. So we had the utility companies come, and they gave them a demonstration in their office, similar to what you're going to see here. And the induction cooktop, he had to make up a Tesla coil and induction coils himself, you see. And nobody really, I've had that patent, and here at the Tesla Society, we've had that patent for years now, trying to figure out what on earth he was doing. So, I'll turn the induction cooktop up, and I lay this coil, bipolar coil, flat on the surface here, and I'll turn the machine on, and I'll set it at the lowest setting, and I have it hooked to a 4.5 kilowatt hot water element out of an electric hot water heater. You felt it, and I don't have the meters on here, so you've got to take my word for it. This is a 4.5 kilowatt unit. Okay? Now, to give you a little better demonstration, I made up a resistor bank, happened to be light bulbs, 100-watt light bulbs. And we'll just plug those in. And I'm heating. This is going to get hot. I can't leave it on too long. And there's another 1,000 watts. Now, you see, I can change the inductive coupling. You see, just by adjusting this, you see, oop, lost it. There, back again. That's 1,000 watts. That's 4,500 watts. What on earth does the induction cooktop take? I don't have the kilowatt meter here. I have it out there, and I can show it out there. And yes, sir. This is a 1,300 watt machine. It's actually taking right now 968 watts. There's 1,000. There's 4,500. It's operating at 300 volts. This particular coil, the coil that I had that got maximum output is in Tom Bearden's hands in Huntsville. He's working out the physics and the electronics. And Tom is presented here in the early days of the Tesla Society. Well, yeah, this right now, I turned it off, is fallen back down to 200 degrees. Let's take a look at this. This is at 85 degrees. And this is 16 gauge wire, and I'm pulling amps with it. Really cranking. I'll do the demonstration later, and we'll put the gauges on it, and you say the inventors conference and that kind of thing afterwards. Well, it's running, the maximum coil that I have built so far is running at 300 volts at 28 kilohertz. That's what the induction cooktop is working at. All right, that 28 kilohertz. Now, what happens if you hook it up to a couple of electrodes in water? You bet. Didn't need any electrolyte. I could do distilled water. It just blew apart. Man, just what Maury King was talking about. Micro bubbles, just foam in there. Plasma ignition. Now you see what we're going to do, and this is, because we've got the pump and the top on it and the bottom on it and the water in and the water out. What we're going to do is put the electrodes in here. Mesh electrodes, not plates. One inside the, set inside the other, one positive, one negative, and minus, and we're just going to explode the gas, the water we're pumping right there. That eliminates the valve. Now all we've got is a set of check valves. We're actually making Tesla check valves. Anything you know about Tesla diodes? Absolutely. No moving parts. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture, and I didn't decide to come here until the day before the conference. And so it was a little bit late. And Steve Ellsworth was glad enough to say, "Yeah, why don't you bring us up to date?" Okay, so I'm building a prototype right now, and if you remember in the original picture I showed that was given to me, that the output ran through a little generator that would provide, I'd steal 10% of the energy and have and run a little alternator. I don't need much. This doesn't take much. And once it's started, it actually gives me back 5 times. We have run Shirk, Patrick, yeah. Shirk has put his own solar on his own house, solar cells, and has the inverters that feed back to the utility company. We know that we can massage this, run one of those inverters, and actually have the power company pay me to run this thing.
Sick 'em dog.
And so what we're going to do is in the field for the grandmas, we're looking for LED lights, and we'll put a light in each one of their little cabins and run the pump. And the excess, because we don't need much, is going to go and light up the place too in the school. All this starting for something that was impossible. Now further, we got distracted actually for some time because some of the people that incorporated us and got us going, an old oil man, a wonderful guy, and Al, this thing is going to be worth zillions. Saving the world is over my pay grade. There's a guy that came and said, "Hey, you do what I tell you to do, and I'll save the world." And what he said was, when the disciples are just kids, Peter was 18, John was 14, and they just fed the 4,000 people with 3 fishes and 5 loaves or something, and he really rubbed it in when he said, "Hey, cut the stuff up and hand it out to everybody." And I wish I could do that here right now, because I don't have 3 fishes and 5 loaves, otherwise I would, and you'd all eat. And he said, he rubbed it in because they collected 12 baskets of food afterwards that was left over. But it began to sink into them. They'd been with him a little while now, and what sank in was, the question was, what do we need to do to work the works of God? Right back at him. He says, your work. And the Greek word means hard labor. It's the only time he ever used it. The only time, because it's a great joy for me to be here. You understand? A great joy. Fun. Ever since I learned my plan, I've been on a fantastic adventure. I've been all over the world. 40 years old, if you told me I was preaching on Red Square before the curtain came down, I would have told you, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. Great joy. Wonderful. I've seen him do wonderful, wonderful things. And I know each one of you, you see, I know that he has a plan for you. So, anyway, the work. What did he say? Your work, you have to work at it, is to believe the one who was sent. You see? And that's a different thing than saying, yeah, there is a God, and two, that he actually came as a man because we're too dumb to work out the problems, and sacrificed his life. And if you really want to work at it, he said, first thing you do, and it's carved in stone. When Moses came off that mountain, there were tablets, and he had carved in stone, and that's where that expression comes from. When it's carved in stone, you don't mess with it, you see. That's the way things are. And Tesla carved some things in stone, and we just saw an example. It's impossible, but we just saw an example. And so he said, the second thing, he said, is to serve your neighbor. How do you do that? And if we're not doing it ourselves to each other, and all of us have difficulties that need to be consoled, et cetera, et cetera, I'm absolutely convinced that every grandchild should be in their grandparents' room when they pass on, to know that what death is, and so they can know the beginning, the end from the beginning. And so he said, you serve each other. And how do we serve each other? By noticing the needs of each one of us. And how do you know that? And how you develop a relationship? You do with your neighbors. You find out about your neighbors. That's why I love talking to every one of you. And, you know, I get stopped in the hall, and I love talking to you, finding out where you are, what you're doing, and how I can help. See? Because I come from a different viewpoint than you come from. And I need your viewpoint, you see, because it's completely different than mine. I'm limited here. But between all of us, man, we can see the whole creation. And if I can help and you can help, he said, I'll move mountains to see that you get what you want. And you'll change the world one by one by serving each other, and you leave the politics up to me. Okay. So I got asked. I got distracted from what I was doing, going to make zillions of dollars. Now, this is all open technology. Share it with everybody. See, that's the best way that I can serve you. Ask me any question, I'll show you how to do it. And from the background I've got, okay, so I got asked, can you put that in a well? Bishop Bill came to me. He has a drilling rig in Kenya, and he's drilling wells all over, but he's tied onto that power line. How, Al, can you build? Yes. Okay, so we redesigned the pump, and the water comes in the bottom here instead of in the side, and we have a pipe coming down here, and the gas is up here. We blow the water down through there and up through the pipe. 5 inches in diameter. We're going to make it 4 inches in diameter and drop it in a 4-inch well or a 8-inch well, 6-inch well, and pump the water from the well. So we're building the prototype right now, the manufacturing prototype, and And so keep looking at our website, and soon we'll be able to show you it operating continuously. And because we can't send it out, they don't send out your car that's going to misfire every week, you know. Chevrolet doesn't make a change to its car until it's driven it a million miles. It gets caught every cotton picking time it doesn't. Door handle doesn't work or something falls off, and because they think it's a simple change. So that's the objective, is to have it running continuously. And go to our website. You can donate to the thing. It's a nonprofit as a Resurrection Anglican Church. It's one of their missions, and we'd love to have any input from you. Because you see, Maury King has been important to the pump project. He's not directly involved, but yes, he is. Your viewpoint, you see, each one of your viewpoints is important to the project. Because I can't see. I didn't even believe the vision I got in the middle of the night. You see what I mean? Okay. You want to show the Navy video real quick? It's just 60 seconds long or so. The reason I have this video on there, and you'll see.
The US Navy is big. Like, really, really big. It's got some 290 ships, thousands of aircraft, and probably tens of thousands of small boats and launches. And apart from a few nuclear-powered carriers and submarines, all of them need fuel, either from a fleet of 15 so-called oilers or fuel ships, or from bases dotted around the world. But the Navy's just announced a technology which is pretty much the holy grail for any global task force. It's managed to perfect the creation of fuel, which is something they need, from seawater, which is something they have no shortage of at all. What's even better, from a military perspective, is that it doesn't require any modification of the ship's engines. You aren't getting a liquid hydrogen fuel out of the mix that needs a fuel cell to operate. You're getting a highly efficient hydrocarbon-based fuel, like gasoline, that can power both ships and aircraft. Although so far the only plane it's powered is this Model 1 at the US Naval Research Laboratory. Small steps though, eh? Here's the science bit. Salt water is passed through an electrically charged cell, which causes the seawater to swap hydrogen ions produced at the anode with sodium ions. At the cathode, the water is reduced to hydrogen gas and sodium hydroxide. The end result is CO2 gas and hydrogen, which are then passed through a heated chamber with an ion catalyst in it, which causes them to combine into long-chain hydrocarbons, that is, fuel and methane gas, which can be siphoned off and used elsewhere. The fuel can then be refined into jet fuel if needed in another nickel-based catalyst. Science bit over. It's predicted to cost around $3 to $6 a gallon to produce. That's about as much as fuel costs at the pump in the US right now. And whilst installing distillation equipment on hundreds of US ships might be expensive, the savings from not having to operate the oiler fleet or get fuel to bases around the world, or from fluctuating prices, will likely run into the billions every year. So, what's the downside? Well, it's not the most eco-friendly solution. Methane is a useful fuel, but a potent greenhouse gas if it's not completely burnt. And even if it is burnt, the whole lot will produce CO2, just like burning any other liquid or gas fuel does. But that's not a new problem, nor is saving the environment the Navy's job. They prefer to save people from the environment, or sometimes destroy it with bombs. At any rate, there are an estimated 80 to 100,000 ships in the world and over 250,000 planes, so the Navy's emissions are a bit of a drop in the ocean. Pardon the pun. The military is already working with a number of partners on commercialising the tech, and it's estimated it'll be finding its way onto US warships within a decade. If you like this video or want to see more of what Genius does, then check out some of the videos to my side right now and click that big old subscribe button down the bottom, or somewhere over there, so you don't miss out on any of the other stuff we're doing.
You see, some people say I'm crazy, I just show them that film. By the way, Steve Ellswick has done a complete analysis of how the Navy is doing, and it was in 2 quarters ago. John, I forget which extraordinary science journal it was in. It's a couple, I think it's a couple from back. And it's one of the best articles he's ever written. It's about 4 pages long that explains in detail exactly what the Navy is doing. And he didn't say, but the Navy, in response to the present administration, is deciding that it's going to become, they can't even buy enough fuel right now for the pilots on the carriers to keep current. And so...
4 minutes out.
Oh, I've got 4 minutes. Oh, goodness sakes. He's got, they can't get enough fuel. See, one of the things that just recently happened with China, you know, we're sort of in the administration has got us at odds with China and also with Russia. And the Chinese refused to allow a carrier group to dock in Hong Kong. Well, the press didn't, they thought, well, they're just doing it to spite us. However, it's important to the Navy because they needed to refuel the oil tenders so the guys could fly off the carriers and have jet fuel. Jet fuel to an airplane on the carrier right now is $100 a gallon, and they're only burning, 100 gallons in a minute or so. So you see it's expensive. And needless to say, the administration didn't help many. So we have had National Security Agency people right here, have we not, who attend this meeting. I haven't identified any. I know a number of people in the National Security Agency who now are retired. You realize I'm 85, and some of the guys that I know are long gone. One of my biggest jobs is to go with families and celebrate the lives of those that have passed on. And, but they were listening. Sitting back there quietly listening, and if you were pretty good and you had any experience, you could identify these guys working for the federal government, the National Security Agency. Because, see, the National Security Agency has its own laboratories. And they try to replicate what we're doing, but they can't come up here and speak at a symposium of what actually they found. Well, guess what? The present Pentagon and those people who you might be upset with are not stupid. And this is one of the results. And they hope to have every Navy ship converted by 2020. And if you want to find an investment that showed the people in the film with the equipment in the labs, there are 2 companies. And if you Google around, you'll find out. But one of them is public. And I think the last time I looked, it was $1 a share. And they're going to be providing the equipment for the entire military. And you realize, you see, your aircraft ticket, I don't know how many flew here. Yeah. Suppose your airplane's running on water. That's how far we've come. I'd be glad to show you this outside. One other thing that we have done is with the plasma ignition, a hydrogen ion is very interesting. And we're still learning. And actually, our molecular model that we use right now and use in the periodic table is, well, it's like when I took astronomy in college. And by the way, T. Townsend Brown took physics from the same professor with when I was there, Dr. Biefeld, and it's called the Biefeld Brown effect, anti-gravity. Everybody who graduated from his course knew how to make anti-gravity. There wasn't any question about it. He was a physicist, wonderful man, wonderful teacher. Physicist of the first water. And space is only 20 miles away. It's 100,000 feet above Albuquerque. And you're out at the edge of space. If you've got a Volkswagen, let's call it a Volkswagen diesel, it gets 50 miles to the gallon. You only need a gallon to get out there. The trouble is, if you do it with a rocket, you got all that weight. You see, and you burn up all the rocket fuel. But if you, let's say, you have a composite light airplane, you just fly right out there. If you can pressurize it to 15 psi, and if you have a small rocket, which they're available now, you can continue to fly out in space. It's only 28 miles away. So, that the present paper and some of the technologies presented here on linear motion being converted into straight line motion. You can go on 1G to the moon and back. It's an afternoon trip. And that's what's in your lifetime. And I praise God, I'll close with this, that the technology, if you've been sitting here in these studies learning about health and the new approaches to health and the new equipment, the technology is growing faster than I'm growing older. If I could just live a little bit more, I've got a chance. Maybe the Lord will see to it that I've got a chance to do more. I'm ready for any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Al Throckmorton. Questions back here, if you would.
Okay, I think we got time about for one, maybe two questions, if we go real fast.
Also, there was a question about what website to go to.
And then Al will be out in the foyer, so you can see him anytime for questions.
The question is, you're creating pressure on that system that you're deploying, and I would like to further think about a Rank-Hill's vortex tube, which creates hot and cold. So you're creating basically free pressure at the same time. You can generate all the heat as well. Have you ever run across that Rank-Hill's vortex tube system?
Well, thank you for your viewpoint, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, because I have not considered it at all.
And there's other theorems. I work with wave theory and wave